Hello, this is Dr. Lori. Welcome to this short history on research ethics, also known as History of Ethics. What I'd like to do is help you to understand and be able to describe or discuss the historical basis for the regulations that are governing human subjects research. And this might seem like a little bit of a memorizing of names and dates and places. So for starters, I just want you to sit back and listen to the story. When I get to the end, I'll point out some of the important pieces that I think questions could be written about much more easily, such as board type questions. But for now, just sit back and listen to the story. Research ethics really came into focus with the Nazi war crimes, and what happened during the war was evaluated during the Nuremberg trials, and out of that came what were called the Nuremberg Code, and those were published in 1947. And they outlined a variety of things that really addressed what happened in the war crimes. They came up with several different specific things that should be required when somebody is conducting research, specifically voluntary consent, whether there's scientific merit, whether the benefits outweigh the risks, and that a person could decide to stop participating at any point in time. And so you can see how those things were really responding to the specific situation that happened in the war camps. Following that, a variety of different organizations came up with their own codes or guidelines, and one of them was the World Medical Association. They met in 1964, nearly 2 decades later, and came up with the Declaration of Helsinki. And there they wanted to outline some things that they felt were really important from a medical perspective, so that there would be some guidelines to help support research worldwide. And then in 1966, a couple of years later, Henry K. Beecher published an article where he had reviewed 22 published research articles, many of them in prominent medical journals, where he pointed out a variety of breaches of research conduct. And so what he was pointing out is that the current research often had some similar misconduct that we've seen previously, that it wasn't just limited to the Nazi war crimes or other very prominent events. And then there were several different studies that came into the public light in a fairly short period of time. The Tuskegee syphilis study was a study of syphilis among black males. It was conducted from 1932 to 1972, and during that time, in the late 1940s, treatment became available for syphilis. Many of the black men did not even know that they had syphilis, and they were studying the natural history of what happened in syphilis, and they thought if they gave them treatment, then they would not be able to ever conduct the same kind of study again. In retrospect, those people deserved to have the treatment that had become available. Another study, the Willowbrook hepatitis study, was a study of institutionalized children with intellectual disabilities, and this happened from 1956 until 1970. And these children were intentionally infected with hepatitis so they could follow the natural history of what happened to people who had hepatitis. There were other studies that happened among the cognitively impaired or prisoners, and all of these things really pointed to the idea that we do not have a good handle on preventing bad things from happening during research studies. And so in 1974, These things all led to the National Research Act, which had two main effects. First, it set up the National Commission. It established the National Commission, which was a group of people who studied this problem from 1975 to 1978. So over a period of time, they looked at a variety of different subsets, pregnant women, cognitively impaired children, prisoners, and so forth, and came out with several different reports. Most notably, then the Belmont Report, which came out in 1979. At the same time, the Public Health Service modified its policy, so also in 1974, in anticipation of the National Research Act. The policy gained regulatory status, and so that the Public Health Service policy was one of the main driving forces of a lot of the changes that were happening during that time. Now, the Belmont Report, coming back to the Belmont Report, it has its three main elements. It has respect for persons, it has beneficence, and justice. And so those are the guiding principles that really help us as we're going through studies that we need to make sure that we're protecting people, that we're respecting their autonomy, that we are doing things in a just way. Well, agencies over time, everybody sort of came up with their own regulations. So in 1991, they came out with what was called the Common Rule, where the regulations became uniform. And so we can apply the same rules across different agencies regardless of where that particular research study is housed or what it's under. Then the Common Rule really helps to make things unified. So that is a very short course, short history. Obviously, each one of these could be a major area of study. The kinds of things that probably would show up on some kind of the certifying exam for public health would be thinking about the Nazi war crimes, the Tuskegee syphilis study, and the Willowbrook hepatitis study. And then the idea that a lot of times we had issues with populations that were maybe marginalized or lacked the ability to speak for themselves. So that concept. Also, the Nuremberg Code, the Declaration of Helsinki, the Beecher article are all really important things that kind of came out of all of those problems. And so those were all attempts at finding a way to put down into words what it is that we're really striving for, as well as the Public Health Service policy, the National Research Act, the Belmont Report, and the Common Rule. So those are all really important things that kind of happened over time and help guide us as we're trying to conduct research ethically. Thank you for joining me and for this short history of research ethics.